two grandmothers secretly spent $487,000 on a house for us. We found out at our son's birthday party. We never moved in. Original post. I need to write this down because if I don't, I'm going to lose my mind. My husband Marcus and I have been married for 9 years. We have 2 kids, Lily, who's 7, and Noah, who's 4. We live in a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in suburban Columbus, Ohio that we bought 4 years ago and are very proud of. We chose it. We paid for it. We painted every room ourselves over a long weekend while the kids stayed with my mother. My mother. That's important. My mother is Carol. She's 64 years old, widowed 12 years ago, lives 40 minutes away in the same town where I grew up, and has, for most of my adult life, been a genuinely loving presence. Difficult sometimes, opinionated always, but loving. She helped us through Lily's first year when I had postpartum depression. She drives Noah to his speech therapy appointments twice a week because our schedules don't always allow it. I have trusted her with the most vulnerable parts of my life. Marcus's mother is Patricia. She's 67, divorced from Marcus's father for 20 years, lives in Westerville, which is about 25 minutes from our house. Patricia is warmer on the surface than Carol, but more calculating underneath. She has this way of making grand gestures that somehow always manage to create obligation. She once gifted Marcus and me a vacation to Myrtle Beach, which turned out to also include her and her sister, a detail she mentioned 2 days before departure. Marcus has spent most of our marriage gently managing her expectations. He's good at it. He's patient in a way I sometimes envy. The 4 of us, Marcus, me, Carol, and Patricia, have a cordial relationship. We do holidays together. We share birthdays. There is, underneath the pleasantries, a low-grade competition between the 2 grandmothers over who is more beloved by Lily and Noah, but nothing I would describe as alarming. Just the ordinary friction of 2 women from different backgrounds who share grandchildren and not much else. I want to be clear about our financial situation, because it matters. Marcus is a senior project manager at a logistics company. I'm a physician's assistant at a pediatric clinic. Together, we make around $185,000 a year. We have a mortgage, 2 car payments, student loans, and we are methodically building savings. We are not struggling. We are also not in a position where someone buying us a house makes any sense, because we already have a house, and we like it. I have to keep reminding myself of that last part, because what happened last Saturday has made me question my grip on reality. We had both families over for Noah's birthday party. Pizza, a dinosaur cake, the usual. About 30 minutes after the kids had gone to the backyard with their cousins, Carol and Patricia asked Marcus and me to sit down in the living room. They were standing next to each other with an energy I can only describe as rehearsed. They were smiling the way people smile when they think they're about to change your life in a wonderful way. Carol said, "We have something to tell you both, and we need you to listen before you say anything." Patricia produced a manila folder. Inside the folder was a purchase agreement for a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house in New Albany, Ohio, a suburb northeast of Columbus, about 30 minutes from where we currently live. The sale had closed 11 days earlier. The price was $487,000. Carol and Patricia had purchased it jointly, each contributing half, with the stated intention that Marcus and I would move in and make it the family home. There were already photographs. Someone, Patricia, I would later learn, had hired a photographer to document the property. There were pictures of a big eat-in kitchen, a fenced backyard, a finished basement, a primary suite with 2 walk-in closets. Marcus looked at the photographs for a long time without speaking. I said, very quietly, "You bought a house." "For the family," Carol said, and she was beaming. "Without telling us. We wanted it to be a surprise." I looked at my mother, the woman who drove my son to speech therapy, who held my hand when I couldn't get out of bed, who I had trusted with the most tender parts of myself, and I felt the floor shift beneath me. "Mom," I said, "we have a house." She waved her hand. "That little place is fine for now, but you're going to need more room. Patricia and I have been talking about this for almost a year." Almost a year. They had been planning this for almost a year. While I was making Noah's therapy appointments and Marcus was working 60-hour weeks and we were having Sunday dinners with each of them separately, they had been collaborating on a real estate purchase that would restructure our entire lives. Marcus set the photographs down. He asked, very calmly, "What exactly are you expecting us to do?" Patricia explained. The vision, apparently, was this: Marcus and I would sell our current home and move into the New Albany house. Carol would have the primary suite on the main floor. Patricia would take the guest suite adjacent to it. Marcus and I would have the upstairs bedroom. The children would share the 4th bedroom. We would all live together as, and I am quoting directly, one family unit. I want you to understand that no one had asked us if this is what we wanted. Not once. In almost a year of planning. Update 1, 3 days later. Marcus and I did not have a full conversation that night. We couldn't. The kids were there. We hugged them and sang and did the cake and smiled through the rest of the party while my brain ran a quiet, continuous loop of what is happening, what is happening, what is happening. After everyone left, we sat at the kitchen table and just looked at each other for a while. Marcus spoke first. He said, "I need you to know that I had absolutely no idea." "I know," I said. "Neither did I." We stayed up until almost 2 in the morning talking. Not arguing, we didn't argue, which surprised me. We were both too stunned for anger to have fully arrived yet. What we did was try to understand the full scope of what had been done. The house was already purchased. That was the central, immovable fact. 2 women between them had spent $487,000 on a property in our name. Well, not in our name. We clarified this the following morning when Marcus asked Patricia to send us the full closing documents. The house was titled jointly in Carol's and Patricia's names. They owned it. Marcus and I were mentioned nowhere in the paperwork. This, I would later understand, was important. I called my sister Dana, who is 2 years older than me and has always been more clear-eyed about Carol's tendencies than I allowed myself to be. I told her the whole story. There was a silence on the line, and then Dana said, "Rebecca." She did not. She did. With Patricia. Apparently they've been talking about it for a year. "Oh my God," Dana said. "Okay. Don't do anything yet. Don't say yes, don't say no. Just buy yourself some time." Dana's instinct was right. I needed to understand what we were actually being asked to agree to before I responded to anything. Marcus and I agreed on 3 immediate ground rules. First, we would not visit the house. Visiting the house would be interpreted as enthusiasm. Second, we would not say no yet, because saying no without a clear plan would trigger an emotional storm we weren't ready to navigate. Third, we would consult a real estate attorney before we said anything substantive. I found a real estate attorney named Jeffrey Harmon through a referral from a colleague. He agreed to a consultation that Thursday. Update 2, 1 week after discovery. Jeffrey Harmon was a trim, silver-haired man in his early 60s who had clearly heard a great many stories about family real estate decisions gone sideways. He listened to the whole situation with the expression of someone watching a familiar film. When I finished, he said, "So they own the house entirely?" "Yes. And they're asking you to sell your current home and move in?" "That's what they've described." He leaned back. "Okay. Several things to unpack here. First, the good news. Because your names aren't on the title, you have no legal obligation to this property in any form. You don't have to move. You don't have to sell your house. You don't owe them anything. What's the bad news? The bad news is that if you decline to move in, they now own a $487,000 house in New Albany with no tenants and presumably no rental plan. That becomes their problem. But given that they're your mother's, it's also going to become your emotional problem. He walked us through the broader picture. If Marcus and I did nothing, simply declined to participate, Carol and Patricia would be left holding a significant asset with carrying costs. Property taxes in New Albany. Utilities. Maintenance. HOA fees, if applicable. He advised us to get a copy of the full HOA documents, which Patricia eventually produced, showing quarterly dues of $425. "Here's what I want you to think about," Jeffrey said. "This isn't just a misguided gift. This is a control mechanism. Whether they consciously framed it that way or not, what they've created is a situation where agreeing to their vision means relinquishing your independence, and declining means generating guilt. That's the structure you're operating in." I wrote that down. That's the structure you're operating in. Jeffrey's recommendation was that we respond in writing, not in person. He helped us draft a letter, calm, formal, affectionate in tone, that expressed our love for both mothers, acknowledged the intention behind the purchase, and clearly stated that we would not be selling our home or moving into the New Albany property. We acknowledged that this was their property and their decision to make, and expressed hope that they would find a use for it that brought them joy. We sent the letter to both of them simultaneously, by email and certified mail, on a Wednesday afternoon. Patricia called Marcus within 20 minutes of receiving it. Marcus let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 7 minutes long. Update 3, 10 days after the letter. I want to try to represent both women fairly, because I think that matters for understanding what happened next. Carol's response came through Dana first. Dana called me the evening after the letter was sent and said that Carol was not taking it well. According to Dana, Carol had cried for most of the day, was telling the story to everyone in her neighborhood book club, and had framed our response as a rejection of her love rather than a rejection of the arrangement. She had said, and I'm quoting Dana quoting Carol, "I just wanted to give them something real." I sat with that for a while. I knew Carol well enough to believe she meant it, that somewhere inside the presumptuousness and the control, there was genuine love trying to express itself in the only language she knew. That didn't make the action acceptable, but it made it human. Patricia's response was more structured and more alarming. She sent Marcus a 7-page email. I'm not exaggerating, 7 pages, single-spaced, organized with headings. The headings included, what we sacrificed, the children's future, your father's legacy, which was confusing since Marcus's father was not dead, just estranged, and most troublingly, our legal position. That last section is what prompted us to return to Jeffrey. Patricia had apparently consulted her own attorney, because the email contained language suggesting that since Carol and Patricia had made this purchase in reliance on representations made by family members, they might have grounds to pursue some form of legal remedy. It was vague and, as Jeffrey would later confirm, almost certainly not actionable, but it was a signal that Patricia was in a different mode than Carol. She's escalating, Jeffrey said, reading the email. This is emotional, not legal. But you need to document everything going forward. We started a shared document, Marcus and I, where we logged every communication from either mother. Dates, times, content, our responses. Jeffrey's advice was to keep all future communication in writing wherever possible. Around this time, Carol and Patricia apparently had a falling out with each other, which Dana relayed to me via text with multiple exasperated emoji. According to Dana, Patricia had begun suggesting that Carol had pressured her into the purchase, while Carol was telling people that the whole thing had been Patricia's idea. Neither version was entirely true. Dana had seen some of the early emails between them, Carol had shared them, inexplicably, with the book club, and the planning had been mutual and enthusiastic from the beginning. The fracture between the two of them was, in a strange way, a relief. It meant their coalition was dissolving. Meanwhile, Marcus and I had begun to think more carefully about what we actually wanted from all of this, not just in terms of the house, but in terms of our relationships going forward. We had been so focused on managing the immediate situation that we hadn't asked ourselves the bigger question: what did we want our lives to look like? We had a long conversation one night after the kids were in bed. We talked about boundaries. We talked about what we needed from both grandmothers in terms of involvement with the children and with us. We talked about what we were willing to offer and what we were not. Marcus said something that I've been thinking about ever since. He said, I think they love us. I think they love the kids. I also think they have spent 60-something years believing that love gives you the right to make decisions for the people you love. And somebody needs to help them understand that it doesn't. That became the frame for everything that followed. Update 4, 3 weeks after the letter. Patricia listed the house. I found out from Marcus, who found out from his cousin Denise, who saw it on Zillow. The New Albany property had been listed at $499,000, a $12,000 markup over what they'd paid, which did not account for closing costs, carrying costs, or the photography session. Real estate agents in our area were estimating it would likely sell, given the market, somewhere between asking price and $10,000 under. Carol had apparently not been consulted about the listing. Dana told me Carol was beside herself. I want to be honest about what I felt when I heard the house was listed. I expected to feel relief, and I did feel some. But underneath it was something more complicated, a sadness, maybe, that it had come to this. 2 women who loved their grandchildren had sunk nearly $500,000 into a dream that nobody else shared, and now they were selling it at a loss and weren't even speaking to each other. Marcus and I agreed that we needed to have real conversations with both mothers. Not managed communications through attorneys and certified letters, but actual conversations. We decided to do them separately, on the same weekend, so neither woman felt like she was getting a lesser version of our attention. I met Carol at her house on a Saturday morning. I brought coffee and the kind of pastries she likes from the bakery near her house. We sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she had taught me to make pie crust when I was 10, where she had sat with me after my father's funeral, where I had told her I was pregnant with Lily, and I was honest with her. I told her that I understood she had been trying to give us something meaningful. I told her that I knew she was afraid, of aging, of becoming peripheral to our lives, of the specific grief of watching your children become people who don't need you the way they used to. I told her I knew because I was afraid of the same thing with Lily and Noah, even now, even while they were still so small. And then I told her that what she had done had frightened me. That making a decision of that magnitude without our knowledge or consent had made me feel like my agency in my own life was not something she respected. That love, real love, doesn't override autonomy. Carol was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I thought you'd be happy. I know you did, I said. That's what worries me. She cried. I cried a little too. We didn't resolve everything that morning. These things don't resolve in one conversation, but something opened up between us that had been closed for a while. Something honest. She told me that Patricia had approached her about the idea initially, framing it as something Marcus and I had apparently mentioned wanting, which was not true, and which Carol had perhaps been too eager to believe because she wanted it to be true. She was embarrassed about that. She said, I should have asked you. Yes, I said. You should have. Marcus's conversation with Patricia was different. Patricia is not a crier. She is someone who, when confronted with wrongdoing, tends to reframe the wrongdoing as an act of misunderstood generosity. Marcus told me afterward that she had spent the first 20 minutes of their conversation explaining, at length, how much the whole situation had cost her, emotionally, financially, in terms of her relationship with Carol. Marcus had let her talk. And then, calmly, he had said, Mom, you told Carol that Rebecca and I had mentioned wanting this. We never said that. I need to know why you said that. Patricia had been quiet. Then she said, I thought if Carol believed it, she'd agree faster. Marcus said he had felt something solidify in him at that moment. Not anger, exactly, but clarity. He had told Patricia that he loved her, that he wanted her in his children's lives, and that he needed to be able to trust her. He had told her that trust meant not being manipulated, even gently, even well-intentionally. He had told her that if she wanted a real relationship with their family going forward, it had to be built on honesty. Patricia had said, I just wanted to be needed. Marcus had said, we need you to be a grandmother. That's real and it's enough. It has to be enough. Update 5, 6 weeks after the original discovery. The new Albany house sold. It closed 5 weeks after listing, at $491,500, about $4,500 over ask, which, after agent commissions, closing costs, carrying costs, and the photography session, left Carol and Patricia each having lost somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 on the venture. Neither of them shared the exact figures with us. We didn't ask. The loss was real, and I won't pretend it didn't matter. But it was also, in the plainest sense, the consequence of a decision made without consultation or consent. Marcus and I had not created that situation. We had simply declined to enter it. Carol and Patricia are speaking again, apparently, though Dana tells me the relationship is altered. I believe that. You don't survive a shared financial loss and a mutual unmasking without some reconfiguration. What has changed for us, Marcus and I, is harder to quantify but more important. We had a family meeting. Not a confrontation, not a showdown, an actual meeting at our kitchen table with both grandmothers, coffee and nobody's lawyer. We brought a document. It wasn't a legal document. Jeffrey had helped us think through the content, but it was written in our voices. We called it, somewhat awkwardly, How We Want Our Family to Work. It was 3 pages. It covered things like, decisions involving our household require our consent, including gifts above a certain value. Grandparent visits are welcome and encouraged and will be scheduled in advance. We will communicate concerns directly rather than through intermediaries. We will assume good intent while also expecting accountability. The children's routines and medical decisions are ours to make. We read it aloud. Both women were quiet through most of it. Patricia asked, with genuine curiosity, what the dollar threshold was for gifts requiring consent. Marcus said we hadn't settled on an exact number, but suggested that anything above what one might spend on a birthday present warranted a conversation. Patricia nodded slowly. Carol asked if she could still take Noah to speech therapy. Yes, I said. Of course. We want that. She looked visibly relieved. I think about that question a lot. Can I still take Noah to speech therapy? It was small and it was enormous. It told me that underneath everything, the grand gesture, the misguided vision, the $500,000 miscalculation, what Carol actually wanted was to be useful. To show up on a Tuesday morning and drive her grandson to an appointment and know that she was helping. That she mattered. That her presence in our lives was something we valued rather than merely tolerated. That I could give her. That I was glad to give her. Final reflection. I've been asked by several people in the comments of earlier posts, before I combined everything here, whether I regret how we handled it. Whether we were too cold, too legalistic, too unwilling to just absorb the gesture and be grateful. Here is what I know. If Marcus and I had accepted what Carol and Patricia proposed, we would have sold the house we chose together and moved into a house chosen for us. We would have cohabited, indefinitely, with 2 women who had already demonstrated a willingness to make major decisions about our lives without our knowledge. We would have taught our children, through example, that love is a valid reason to yield your agency to someone else. We didn't do that. We said no, clearly and respectfully and without cruelty. We dealt with the discomfort that followed. We had hard conversations rather than performed ones. We asked our mothers to meet us honestly, and they did, imperfectly, haltingly, but genuinely. Marcus and I are still in our Columbus ranch house with the rooms we painted ourselves. Lily still has her purple bedroom, and Noah still has the dinosaur mural Marcus painted on a Saturday in April 3 years ago. We have a mortgage we chose. We have a life we built. Carol came over last Tuesday to take Noah to therapy. She brought a coffee cake, which she left on the counter without ceremony. Before she left, she hugged me at the door and held on for a moment longer than usual. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Patricia texted Marcus last week a photo of a snow globe she'd found at an antique market, the kind with a little Columbus skyline inside. She wrote, "Saw this and thought of the kids. Under $10, I'm certain." Marcus texted back, "They're going to love it." And they did. I'm answering comments as I can. To those asking, yes, we did consult an attorney. No, we are not punishing our mothers. They are present and welcome in our lives, and their grandchildren adore them. Yes, the financial loss was real and it was hard, and I hold some grief about that. No, I don't think I should have just said thank you and moved in. I don't think love requires that. I don't think love should require that. Thanks for reading. Edit. For the people asking about Jeffrey Harmon, he practices in Columbus, and yes, he was wonderful. I'm not posting his contact info publicly, but if you DM me with a situation, I'll share it privately. Edit 2. Noah got his highest therapy evaluation score to date last week. Carol cried in the parking lot, according to Noah. He said, "Grandma Carol got happy water in her eyes. That's all."